Hi folks, my name's John Bandler. This is some off-the-cuff answers to questions that are asked in a cyber law course that's using my book. I'm making this public. This is not a course I'm teaching. Maybe other people will find this interesting or helpful. Let's see how it works. You can learn about law. You can learn about cyber law. Law cannot be just for lawyers, and I've got a lot of resources on my website. And these questions pertain to Chapter 22 on virtual currency and money laundering and Chapter 23, solving the cyber crime problem. And it is March 7th, 2026. So I'm answering your questions, and I hope it makes the course interesting. I hope it helps the instructors teaching with this. And remember, laws all around us. Law cannot just be for lawyers. It's for everyone. Cyber is everywhere, and that means cyber law is for everyone. And that's why I wrote the course book to teach with it. It's readable, and I want to answer the questions. This is off the cuff. It's not a polished slide deck or video. More misspeaks, and sometimes I even make a mistake. So here's the book parts. And I really like the way I organized it. I give a solid introduction to law, then introduction to cyber. And these questions are really about part 4, criminal cyber law. Don't forget those chapter resource pages because you can dive in. And I've got footnotes and resources for each chapter that's in the book, but also in those resource pages. I wanted to make it easy for students to find it. And here we got chapter 22 and 23 resource pages. I'll put the link in the description. Disclaimers, of course. You can pause it and read it, but this is quick off-the-cuff answers. It's not going to be perfect. All right, first question is, I'm curious if we will cover some of the more recent events related more to privacy and security, the controversial OpenAI and DOW, meaning Department of War, which is officially the Department of Defense. The OpenAI Department of Defense partnership is very interesting to follow now. Now, if you were watching last week's video, we did discuss that relating to Anthropic and their falling out with the Department of Defense, Department of War. Yeah, it's definitely very interesting to follow. And I just want to remind you that most of your learning in life, including the time you're in college and graduate school, is going to happen outside the classroom. So whether you cover it in your course or not, obviously it's not in the course book because I wrote the course book in 2025, last year, so I can't include current events in it, but it is pretty current up to the time of publication. And that's why the resource pages may have more. You're welcome to follow me on LinkedIn and Substack because I've been posting about these things with my opinion. But remember, again, most of your learning in life, it happens outside the classroom. So don't wait for an instructor or a course to cover it. This formal education, it's to give you a lot of basics, but mostly to teach you how to learn, to improve your skills in your brain for those things you need to learn, read, analyze things. And we should follow along with current events. This is our world. We're living in it. If you're in this country, it's your country, even if you're just visiting for a bit or if you're a resident or citizen. And when we see these things in the news, we want to use the principles of law and analysis we're learning in the course, in our other courses. And in the course book, I talk about the importance of thinking like a lawyer, but not just any lawyer. In part 1, we talk about that mindset and how to assess things, and we return to it throughout the book. We want to look to those principles we talk about, and hopefully you're learning in education about how do we identify facts? How do we analyze information to see what is a fact, what's true, what's false, what is the law we should apply? And if we know the law, we look to see how we might apply it to new circumstances. We're using reason and logic. With facts, we got to assess credibility and reliability. And then with laws and new circumstances, we do what lawyers do. We analogize and distinguish. And basically that's looking at what is the same and what is different. And what I think is really interesting with the Anthropic situation is you want to assess the credibility of the Department of War, Department of Defense. You see how they labeled Anthropic a supply chain risk? So you want to ask yourself, did they label Anthropic a supply chain risk because they really believed they were a supply chain risk? Or did they do it as a punitive measure of retribution, simply to try to punish Anthropic for not doing what they wanted? And you look at surrounding facts on that to try to figure out, hey, are they really a supply chain risk, or is this something improper the government is doing? And you'd look to surrounding facts, for example, that they've been doing business for a long time together, hundreds of millions of dollars in contracts. Wait, it might even be billions. Check me on that. Let me know in the comments that they were going to enter into another deal, and then all of a sudden the Pentagon decided they were a supply chain risk. That seems a little bit hard to believe. So you can apply all these principles to current events, and I would ask you to do that, whether or not it's covered in a specific course. And certainly you can ask about it, and we're talking about it here. Question. So a lot of questions on cryptocurrency. Do you think cryptocurrency will ever reach a level of regulation that truly deters criminal use, or will the decentralized nature of it always stay one step ahead of law enforcement? So I want to pick a couple things apart in here. Ever reach a level of regulation that truly determines criminal use? No, that's not going to happen. Well, there's going to be a little deterrent, but not to totally deter it, right? We have laws, criminal laws, and it's not just regulation, it's the criminal laws too. Does it deter some crime? Yes. But does it deter all crime? Of course not. So you know there will always be crime, there will always be money laundering through the traditional financial system and through cryptocurrency. But what we want, or what most reasonable people should want, is proper regulation and law enforcement that it deters a good percentage of crime. Now, will the decentralized nature of it always stay one step ahead of law enforcement? So I would ask you to really question how much cryptocurrency is truly decentralized and what we really mean by decentralized. Yes, maybe there are decentralized ledgers, but when people are investing in cryptocurrency, whether it's a particular coin, when people are investing in platforms that help administer or exchange cryptocurrency, where there's ownership of it and management of it, you need to ask yourself, how decentralized is it truly? All right, this next question. Do you think cryptocurrencies will eventually become more regulated by governments around the world, or will they remain mostly decentralized and independent from traditional financial systems? Again, what do we really mean by decentralized? A lot of people misuse that word in the context of cryptocurrency, and we need to realize how integrated they're becoming with a lot of traditional financial companies. And when you say more regulated, let's not assume it hasn't been regulated. So if you read the book, you'll see regulation and enforcement has been there even before cryptocurrencies with virtual currencies. And it's not that it eventually gets more and more and more. This is a tug of war that happens in law and the country and society, right? We had a significant decrease in regulation and enforcement starting in 2025. So we need to think about that too. A lot of politics involved, and not just politics, but money. Cryptocurrency owners and companies contributed a lot, and you could argue that influenced the election. And now regulations and enforcement is less. I'm curious about how law enforcement keeps up with constantly changing cryptocurrencies and digital assets. Do agencies have dedicated specialists for tracking these, or is monitoring them just part of broader cybercrime teams? I think it depends on the agency. I think some like to say, oh, we have a special cryptocurrency analysts or unit, and sometimes agencies, you create a new unit, you do a press release. It's sometimes they like to do that. Others may just have it part of the cybercrime teams. But obviously, if you're interested in combating crime, you need to follow the money. And some of that money, some of the profit is going through cryptocurrencies. So you need to be able to track of that. How do they keep up with it? Well, hopefully they are following the crimes and reading the news and getting reports from victims and staying in touch. And that is the job of law enforcement and prosecutors and government, to keep up with things. How difficult is it for law enforcement officials in those investigation cases involving cryptocurrency to track down transactions involving criminal activity? It's hard. And not just cryptocurrency. Anytime there's criminal activity and the criminals are making money and spending money and receiving money, it's hard to track it down, because that's what the criminals do. If it was easy to track down, it would be easy to catch them. They need to launder their money, and that is why we have a chapter on virtual currency and money laundering. It is fascinating, but the criminals have to hide their ill-gotten gains. They're trying to make it hard for law enforcement. They're trying to make it difficult for law enforcement. And then it's law enforcement's job to try to uncover that. And cryptocurrency, obviously, is hard too in its own ways. But check out the Western Express case. Now, that was before cryptocurrency, but that was cybercrime, money laundering with virtual currency. Those identity thieves and cyber criminals tried to make it hard to track them down. One question I have is how state and local governments can realistically build cybercrime units with limited budgets. Should federal funding be expanded specifically for local cybercrime enforcement training? I don't know what the budget has been before. Federal government traditionally gives a lot to state governments. Now you're seeing kind of a lot of tension. Tension is too mild a word. But you insert a stronger adjective, tension between the federal government and state governments, including on law enforcement. Obviously, the reason I wrote the 2020 book on cybercrime investigations was to give state and local law enforcement resources on how to investigate these, because they need to do something. And I would point to the concept that law enforcement should do reasonable investigations on all areas of crime. And they can't say, oh, it's cybercrime, I can't do anything on it. They need to do something that is reasonable. Maybe not a Western Express level investigation, but there must be something reasonable for the size of that organization. And we propose that in the book. I think it's the 6-step method to do that. Given how topical, I think that means typical, given how typical cybercrimes have become nowadays, spanning a period of almost more than 10 years, still it does not seem as if cybercrimes are treated as ordinary crimes. Hence, do you think we would ever get to that time when cybercrimes would be treated like ordinary crimes? And also, what would be the reason why cybercrimes are treated separately and as novel? So if you follow along in the book, you'll see one recurring theme is we compare how some things are the same as they have been for a long time and some things are new. And we did that with crime and theft, right? We looked at how theft has been around since the first humans, and with computers and the internet, now we have cybercrime. In some ways it's different. In some ways it's the same. So the book has that recurring theme. We do that with payment and value and virtual currency, where we talked about how humans used value long before the currency even exists. And so in a way, cryptocurrency and virtual currency is new. In a way, it's the same. And you can do similar analogies and distinguishments. That's not a word, but you look at how it's the same, how it's different. That's part of thinking like a lawyer. but we do it objectively. We're not just any lawyer trying to win an argument or win our case. We're doing it as learners, objectively and honestly, weighing these different things. So, I mean, my philosophy is we are in the cyber age. Cyber is intimately intertwined with everything we do. You can't have police agencies saying, oh, we don't investigate cybercrime. So that's my philosophy, my thinking. Do you know any internships that maybe some of your students could take part in? So that's a question for your instructor and the teachers and professors in your school. And you do want to get to know them and make a connection and let them know you're doing honest work and thought from yourself, so they can get to know you. And you want to see what internships and partnerships your school may have, and you want to explore on your own what companies are out there and what might be available. And that is part of these skills of learning and investigating and researching, because you need to investigate and research to get those internships. And that's why I like my book, because we actually talk about that type of skill you need in life and should build in school in part 1 of the book. So think of trying to get an internship or your next job or your career path as research and investigation you need to do, because to find that internship or to find the right one, you have to do that diligence and research and investigation. Okay, so thank you for watching Laws for Everyone, Cyberlaw 2. I love answering questions that are genuine. And I will tell you, in my time teaching, almost 10 years, I've also answered a lot of ChatGPT generated questions. That's less fun, but I do like helping people. If I answered your question, let your professor know next assignment submission so they know you watched this, that you watched your question get answered. If you have a follow-up or I didn't answer it right, feel free to ask. And another way to let your professor know you watched this is to mention this phrase: law is not just for lawyers. I've got more links in the description, including to my socials, where I do post about these issues of the day. And these other resources will be there too, including I'll put links to the chapter resources too. Again, don't forget the disclaimers. Thanks for watching. You take care. Bye.